If you'll turn in your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 18, 19, and 20, we're going to read some texts out of these three chapters concerning David and Jonathan and their friendship. Men have a hard time sometimes making friends and keeping deep friendships through life. I'm not talking about acquaintances in this talk. I'm going to be talking about deep friendships. And men need deep friendships. God created us for community. Sometimes men have a hard time. In fact, Bill Hybels at times has called men in America the friendless American male. And in many times that's true. Men have a hard time with deep, abiding friendships, much harder time than women do. And I think there's some reasons for that. I think there's a genetic reason. I think women just have a tendency to talk more, to communicate more. Men are a little more action oriented, a little harder time communicating, especially on the heart level. So I think it makes it hard for men to have relationships and build those deep friendships over time the way that women can. I also think that there is some location issues. I think several generations ago, when a boy was raised, he was raised with other boys, and they were friends through elementary school and junior high and high school, and they stayed in the same town, and they worked together, and they got married and raised babies and retired, and they were friends for life because they were raised in small towns and where they didn't really leave one another. Well, now we live in a culture that is so diverse, and there's so much moving and so much transition. And I think that makes it scary for men sometimes to build deep friendships, because I don't know when I'm going to be leaving. I may be moving in 3 years or 5 years. We're chasing careers, we're chasing money, and that makes it very difficult then for us to build those friendships, because for men it takes longer to build those good friendships than it does for women. And many times we don't want to build them and lose them, so we just kind of put up walls and don't build them at all. And so I certainly think location has an issue. I think time has an issue. I think by the time you work 60 hours a week and take care of your family and go to your kids' soccer practice and baseball practice and date your wife and take care of the things around the house, I think it's real hard to carve out the time to be a good friend, because friendship does require time. And so I think that can be an issue. But really, when it comes right down to it, the biggest issue I think for men is just fear. Just fear. We have a hard time letting down our guard and letting other men in. We don't trust very well. We don't get in touch with our deepest emotions. I think we have a fear that if somebody really knew us, they wouldn't like us. And we have a tendency subconsciously to meet other men and decide what they want us to be and then try to become that for them, instead of just letting the guard down and being real and authentic and expressing who we really are. Because I think many times in life we're scared that if we do that we will get rejected. And we have that fear of rejection. That's a part of who we are as a man. So we just close off and don't ever open ourselves up to be rejected. But the downside of that is we also never open ourselves up for deep, abiding friendships. And so many of us go through life and literally don't have very many friendships. In fact, if you can go through life and end up and have 2 or 3 really true good friends that stick beside you in good times and bad, you're a very fortunate man. Many men don't ever have that. And so today I really want to talk about, what does it look like to be a good friend? How do you create good friendships? And we're going to take our relationship with David and Jonathan out of 1 Samuel as really our template for how we look for good friendships. And so there's 5 basic elements of good friendships. And the first one is commitment. Commitment. Look at 18:1 through 4. After David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son. There was an immediate bond between them, for Jonathan loved David. From that day on, Saul kept David with him and wouldn't let him return home. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed the pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David, together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. And so we see from the very beginning there is this special relationship between David and Jonathan. And here's how it's expressed in 1 Samuel chapter 18:1. It says in my version, the New Living, there was an immediate bond between them. There was an immediate bond between them. Let me tell you what the Hebrew phrase literally means. It literally means their souls were bound together. Well, that is very deep. From the deepest part within them, their souls, they were bound together as good friends. And it says here that Jonathan loved David like he loved himself, which reminds me of what Jesus says later on. We need to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. But he really was a true friend to David, and David was a true friend to him. And it all starts with this commitment that just says, I'm willing to walk through life with you. I'm willing to be your friend in the good times and the bad times. I'm willing to be your friend when things are good. I'm willing to be your friend when we walk through tough times, because we're going to walk through tough times together. And if you're ever going to have good friends, abiding friends, long, deep friendships, men who get past acquaintances, there has to be a co-commitment to join into that relationship. You think about it, there's a commitment of time. I can't build a deep, abiding friendship with another man if we don't spend time together. We can spend time watching football or riding motorcycles or going to a sports bar or playing golf or whatever it is, but it takes time. Lots of time, quality time, quantity time to build a good, lasting friendship. And so there's a time commitment there. There's also a heart commitment. I have to be willing to open up my heart and let someone in. Now, we don't start there. It takes a long time to really open up your heart. But if you want a deep, abiding friendship, you have to let down the walls, and you have to let the other person in, and you have to tell them how you really feel, and you have to tell them when you're scared, and you have to tell them when things aren't going well. You don't put up the facade and play tough guy. You let down your pride, and you become authentic and real about who you are and what you feel and how you think about things. And for a good, deep, abiding friendship, there has to be a commitment on both parts to do that. One man can't do that. Both men have to be willing to be real and authentic about who they are. That's very scary for a man. And honestly, a lot of men never get there. They never get to a good friendship because they're just not willing to take that risk. And the reason is because inside the heart of a man, we're always asking ourselves that question, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes? And many times the answer for us is no, I don't have what it takes. And I'm scared I don't have what it takes, and so I'm just going to shut off and not take the risk that I don't. And so there's a commitment there to being real and authentic. And then I think there's a commitment to emotional energy. Friendship takes emotional energy. There are acquaintances that are going to be your acquaintances in good times, but you know your friends in the bad times. When you're going through a divorce, when you lose your job and you're unemployed, when you don't have any money, when you've had an affair and you get caught, you find out who your real friends are. You find out the guys that are there for the fair weather, that as soon as life gets tough, they run, and then you find out that 2 or 3 guys that say, you know what, I'm committed to you. And it's going to take emotional energy, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take real, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to be hard, but I'm not walking away from you. I'm not walking away and saying, contact me when you're doing better. I'm going to walk through this with you to the very, very end. And that's who your friends are. That's who your friends are. When you go through the darkest times and the toughest times, that's when you know who your friends are. And so there's a commitment level that is taken to become a good friend. And so that you have to give that and receive that. Got to go both ways. So if I want to be a good friend, I have to start by being willing to do those things myself for the other person, and they have to be willing to do that for me. That takes a lot of time. That takes careful choosing. You have to be careful when you choose your friends. You don't want to just choose anyone. You want to find someone who is safe and someone who's trustworthy. That's a part of friendship. But that commitment level is necessary from the very beginning. Number 2 is personal sacrifice. Personal sacrifice. It's interesting to me here that Jonathan knows that David is going to end up being king of Israel. Now, Jonathan, by law, should be the next king of Israel. But God has told Saul, you're not going to be the next king because of your disobedience. I'm going to choose David. I'm going to choose a man after my own heart. So Jonathan's not going to be the next king. Jonathan gets it, and he understands it, and so he makes a personal sacrifice and gives to David what it says here is his tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. In other words, symbolically, What Jonathan did was he gave David the kingdom. He sacrificed the kingdom and gave it to David. And anytime you're involved in friendship, you have to be willing to sacrifice some things personally for that friendship. Sometimes sticking by a guy in a tough times means you lose a relationship with another friend, or maybe with his wife if they're going through a divorce, or it could cost you some money. You could have to sacrifice some time and energy. You might have to get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to go help a guy. There's all sorts of personal sacrifices that it takes to be a good friend. A lot of men never become good friends because, quite honestly, to be just blunt with you, they're too selfish. They're just too selfish. They're not willing to make personal sacrifices. They don't want to get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. They don't want to have emotional energy drained out of them. They don't want to put other acquaintances on the line. They are too selfish to make personal sacrifices. They're just not willing to do it. And so the result is, as sad as it is they just don't have good friendships because you can't make a good friend with someone else if you're not willing to sacrifice for that relationship, because all good relationships require sacrifice, including, by the way, marriage, including marriage. And so although we're talking about friendship between men here, all of these principles apply to marriage. And so that is very, very important as well. Number 3 is loyalty. Look at 19:1 now. We're going to go to the next chapter. Saul now urged his servants and his son Jonathan to assassinate David. But Jonathan, because of his strong affection for David, told him what his father was planning. Tomorrow morning, he warned him, you must find a hiding place out in the fields. I'll ask my father to go out there with me, and I'll talk to him about you. Then I'll tell you everything I can find out. The next morning, Jonathan spoke with his father about David, saying many good things about him. The king must not sin against his servant David, Jonathan said. He's never done anything to harm you. He has always helped you in any way he could. Have you forgotten about the time he risked his life to kill the Philistine giant, and how the Lord brought a great victory to all Israel as a result? You were certainly happy about it then. Why should you murder an innocent man like David? There is no reason for it at all. So Saul listened to Jonathan and vowed, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. So what I want you to notice here about friendship is how loyal Jonathan was to David. And he was loyal in 2 areas. One, he was willing to speak highly of David to his own father Saul, who's the king of Israel. Well, think about how much Jonathan is putting on the line there. He's defying his father. He's going against his father. He's speaking well of David, who his father hates, who his father is trying to murder. And so one of the first ways you show loyalty to your friends is you absolutely refuse to talk behind their backs. Absolutely refuse to talk behind their backs. Now, this is a broad generalization, and so I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but sometimes I get so frustrated at Christians because in this area we are worse friends than worldly guys are. Worldly friends will get mad at each other and cuss each other out and fight and push and shove and hit, and at the end of the day they shake hands and they walk the other way. Sometimes Christians, we act like we're not supposed to quote, be mean to each other, and so we smile at each other and never work out our problems and then go talk bad behind our friend's back. Which is worse? Which is worse? We need to be willing. If I have a problem with you and you're my friend, I go to you and we talk it out and we work it out. But I never talk bad about my friends behind their backs. Christians are awful, just awful, at being nice to people in front of their face and talking bad behind their backs. And just don't ever do that. You will never be a good friend. You will not keep friends forever if you do that. That is a loyalty issue and it breaks up friendships. But the other one I notice here that I think is equally as important is that Jonathan goes to David and warns him about what is coming. He warns David and says, my father's trying to kill you and you need to get out of here. Here's what is interesting about that. There's a great phrase about friendship. A friend is someone who stabs you in the front. I want you to think about that. A friend is someone who stabs you in the front. Your enemies stab you behind your back. But a friend warns a friend. A friend comes up to another friend and says, hey, listen, I don't like the way that you're flirting with your secretary. I think you're getting yourself in trouble. Hey, I don't like the fact that you're making unethical decisions in your business practices. I think that you're going to have to pay for that. Not not out of meanness, not out of spite, but out of love. I love you. I care about you. You're my buddy. Don't do this. Please don't do this. We would never physically let someone run off a bridge and say, well, it was none of my business. If we were in a war together, we wouldn't let one of our buddies get out of a bunker and go charge the enemy and get killed and say, well, it was none of my business. No, we'd pull him back in the bunker. We would save our friend's life physically. Why won't we do that spiritually? Why won't we do that emotionally? When we see our friends starting to make bad decisions and we know it's going to destroy our lives, instead of being passive and saying, well, I don't need to get involved and, well, it's none of my business, why don't I just take him out to dinner? Why don't I take him to a bar and watch a football game and just say, listen to me. I love you. I care about you. And I see this, what I perceive to be happening in your life, and you're just going to get hurt. Don't hurt yourself. Don't do this. Let's not let our friends make decisions that hurt their lives and destroy their lives and break up their marriages and hurt their kids, when as friends we can maybe stop it. Or you know what, if we can't stop it, at least they know we cared enough to say something and they'll come back to us later. I have had several instances where I did this and the men didn't appreciate it at the time, but they came back later and thanked me. And many times said, you know what, you really saved me a lot of pain and suffering. Or you know what, I know that you're a good friend. You were the only one willing to say something. That is what happens to good friends. So be a good friend. How do you be a good friend? Well, you never talk bad about your buddy's back. If you have a problem with it, you go to him face to face. And two, if you see him making decisions that could hurt him and destroy his own life or his family, you care enough to get involved. You don't sit back and say, it's none of my business. You grab the guy and you try to talk him into making good decisions instead of letting him walk down a line that'll hurt himself. That's friendship. That's how you build a lifelong friend that is forever, is you treat them that way. Number 4 really is trust and integrity. Trust and integrity. And we're going to go to chapter 20 to talk about trust and integrity. The story is Saul is now, he wants to kill David. And Jonathan is going to basically set up a circumstance where he's going to find out for sure if Saul plans on killing David. And if he does, he's going to warn David so David can run away. And it all is wrapped around a story of a feast. And so this feast is being held, and Jonathan's going to the feast, and David is not going to be at the feast. And then when his dad Saul asks where he is, Jonathan's going to be able to start a conversation with his dad to find out if his dad plans on killing David, and if so, he's going to warn David to leave, and if he's not, he's going to tell David to stay. And so that's kind of the gist of the story. But I just want to read a couple of things to you here. Verse 16, so Jonathan made a solemn pact with David, saying, may the Lord destroy all your enemies. And Jonathan made David reaffirm his vow of friendship again, for Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. There's that great phrase again of Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. And there's that commitment again of that vow of friendship. Okay, so now David's going to go hide while Jonathan finds out the answer to the question, is my dad really going to try to kill David and I need to warn him? Or is it safe for David to come back to the palace? So we pick up the story in verse 28. They're now at the feast, and his dad Saul is asking where David is. And Jonathan replied, David earnestly asked me if he could go to Bethlehem. He said, please let me go. We are having a family sacrifice. My brother demanded that I be there, so please let me get away to see my brothers. That is why he isn't here at the king's table. Saul boiled with rage at Jonathan. You stupid son of a whore, he swore at him. Do you think I don't know that you want him to be king in your place, shaming yourself and your mother? As long as that son of Jesse is alive, you'll never be king. Now go and get him so I can kill him. But why should he be put to death? Jonathan asked his father. What has he done? Then Saul hurled his spear at Jonathan, intending to kill him. So at last Jonathan realized that his father was really determined to kill David. Jonathan left the table in fierce anger and refused to eat on that second day of the festival, for he was crushed by his father's shameful behavior toward David. So now Jonathan is going to come out and warn David. And so he comes here in verse 41 of chapter 20. As soon as the boy was gone, David came out from where he had been hiding near the stone pile. Then David bowed 3 times to Jonathan with his face to the ground. Both of them were in tears as they embraced each other and said goodbye, especially David. At last Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn loyalty to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is the witness of a bond between us and our children forever." Then David left, and Jonathan returned to his town. What's so amazing is the way that Jonathan and David could trust each other. David could trust that Jonathan was going to tell him the truth. David could trust that Jonathan was going to find out the real intention of his dad. Jonathan could trust David that David was going to be loyal to him and his descendants for the rest of their lives. And we know that that is indeed the case because of the way David treated Jonathan's family even after he had passed away. And so there was this bond between them where they could trust each other. There was trust and integrity. And I want you to listen to this very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is true in friendship and in marriage. In any relationship, the currency of the relationship is trust. You can never love someone deeper than you can trust them. And as you begin to build a relationship with a friend or with a spouse, you learn to trust them. And that's kind of currency in the emotional bank account. And as you are trustworthy and as you have integrity, the account rises. And there's going to be times in any friendship, in any relationship, where you're going to tell a white lie to each other, or you're going to have problems, or you're going to be mad at each other. And those lapses and those little places of integrity, you can lose a little bit of trust. But as long as there's money in the bank account, emotional money based on trust of that relationship, the relationship can go on. But as soon as the trust is gone and you can't trust them anymore, the relationship's over. Because when there's no trust and there's no integrity in a relationship, there's no reason for a relationship. You can be an acquaintance and not trust. You can't be a friend and not trust. That's the reason so many marriages end, is because the trust ends. That's why affairs destroy so many marriages, is because the trust is broken. It's the same thing in a friendship. If I have a good friend and I can trust him and he's trustworthy and he has integrity, and every once in a while he does something to hurt me, or every once in a while he says something to hurt me, I can live with that. But if I have a friendship and I begin to notice a lack of integrity on a consistent basis, and I notice that he lies to me on a consistent basis, there'll come a day where I'll say, you know what, friendship with him isn't worth it because I can't trust him. Trust is the currency of healthy relationships. So I've got to learn to be trustworthy and have integrity if I'm going to build good relationships. Now let's go back to the beginning. Men have a difficulty making good, deep relationships with other men. They have a hard time building deep friendships. Why? Let me tell you why. Because it takes personal sacrifice, and many men are selfish. It takes commitment, and many men don't want to take the time and the emotional energy to make that kind of commitment. It takes loyalty, and a lot of men, they don't want to be loyal to each other. But the big one, I think, is this whole trust issue. A lot of men never want to trust another man. They never let another man in, and they don't want to get to that level of another man to where they're really building a relationship based on trust and integrity. So if you want to be a great friend, you've got to overcome those tendencies to withdraw, to not tell the truth, to not be authentic. You've got to be committed. You've got to be willing to sacrifice. You've got to get over your selfishness. You've got to have loyalty to your friend. You have to be willing to speak the truth when no one else will, even if it hurts their feelings sometimes. You have to protect their back. You have to get their back. You can't talk behind their back. And you have to build trust in that relationship and tell the truth to one another. That's what builds great friendships. So here's what I want you to do. You probably have a lot of acquaintances. But do yourself a favor and enjoy one of the greatest blessings God has ever given you in life. Take the time and the energy to build 1 or 2 or 3 really good friendships. It'll pay huge dividends. You will be happier. You will be more contented as a person. You will live life more like God intended you to live if you'll just take the time to build those deep, meaningful friendships. Those are the things that will take you through life, not your money, not your power, not your acquaintances, not your title at the office. Those things aren't going to carry you through. What's going to carry you through is those deep, abiding, godly friendships with other men. So take the time, take the energy, and become and develop great friends with a couple of guys. It will bring you joy and happiness to your life.